You're listening to the Muckrakers on today's News Talk, TNT.
Well, a very warm welcome back to the Muckrakers with me, Andrew Eborn, joined today by RADHA, STIRLING and a TNT titan, James Freeman. And we've been looking at some of the recent cases which are basically eroding freedom of speech. I want to start off with Richard Medhurst, basically British journalist Richard Medhurst. He believes his arrest on terrorism charges was due to his reporting of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, particularly Israelis' actions in Gaza. He was detained at Heathrow Airport on the 15th of August, under Section 12 of the UK's Terrorism Act of 2000, and he was accused of expressing supportive views for a prescribed organisation. RADHA, what's your take on this case?
I mean, it seems like, for Richard, yes, he has been outspoken about Israel-Palestine. He's been outspoken, I believe, about the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And I don't think that they like his overall sort of anti-conflict, anti-warmongering viewpoints. And I think he would be an important target to basically arrest him, to get access to his technology, to see who he's been communicating with, and to scare him. I think they want him to live in fear. He has said publicly he doesn't know, are there going to be charges coming against him? Will he end up on trial? He doesn't know anything at this point. So he is feeling that perhaps he doesn't want to speak as much publicly as he did before. However, I think like anyone in this situation, you can't go quiet. You need to rally up as much support as you possibly can, because the minute you go quiet, they might just go to try and secure a conviction against you. And I think, we see in the US that the DOJ usually throws about 20 charges against opponents or journalists or, people who they don't like. 20 charges against them. They're completely fabricated, but do you want to take a chance in court with a jury? I don't think I would. When you're offered a 2-year sentence or similar for a crime that you didn't even commit, they usually offer you wire fraud as a negotiation, even though you've never had anything to do with wire fraud. You just plead guilty to that, get 2 years, and it's done. And their job's done because you've been ruined. Your reputation is ruined. You've entered a guilty plea. So I think that's definitely what they do in the US, and it will be fascinating to see how far they might take this case. I think that he has a lot of support. I don't think people want to see him. And regardless of his views, whether you support Israel or Palestine or Russia or Ukraine, this kind of weaponization is totally unacceptable. Terrorism laws, you look at him, you look at all of his interview, this man is not a terrorist. And no British citizen thought that these laws would be weaponized against someone in this manner. It's not just him. We're seeing it with people, journalists who speak publicly, again, or work in Russia, maybe for the Russian Times, which, is not illegal. And when they come back to the UK, they are hounded by authorities. And this is not the kind of regime that we want to live in. In fact, it's exactly the regime that we criticize. That I, having worked with the UAE for so many years now, 16 plus years, and I've seen the kind of censorship, the kind of, arrests without warrants, without cause, the detentions, unfair, lengthy detentions. I've taken cases to the United Nations. And we've always criticized that as the United Kingdom. And yet I can see every day I'm finding it difficult for myself to criticize the UAE when I can see my own country and my own countries. I'm American as well. So I can see my own countries doing this, Australia, America, and the UK, engaging in exactly the same behavior that we have criticized for so long. I think that he should receive an apology and be told now that they're not going to be pursuing any charges against him.
Yeah, and that would be so good. Justice not supposed to be done, but just to be seen to be done. But also, you basically have to make sure it's blind to these sort of things. And any suggestion that this is done for political purposes needs to be investigated really urgently. James, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said so far. There's other examples, like Sarah Wilkinson, for example. She was outspoken on the Gaza conflict with Israel. And it's clear that, it was pretty intimidating. They sent 12 police officers round at 7 a.m. in the morning just for things that she'd posted online. So I think there is, and of course, her devices were seized again. So again, I think this is just as much about phishing exercise as it is anything else. But look, I think the backdrop to this, and we talked about this, I think, on Friday's Muckrakers, Andrew, is the question is, why is this happening now? Why in the West are they feeling the need to clamp down? And I think the honest answer to that is the same as why Pavlov was arrested over the CEO of Telegram, is because this is nothing to do with about free speech, about terrorism. This is about truth, actually, and the fact that we've got people talking about inconvenient truths. And it's because our governments are lying so much. That's why we're seeing an increase in the use of these tactics, because their narrative, the official narrative of the US and the UK and NATO, is they're lying. They're lying to their citizens. And the reason I think they're clamping down is because they are worried about being exposed, essentially. Obviously, we've got Telegram, we've got all these new platforms now where people can share information, and people are sharing information, and lots of people are becoming aware of the truth, and they can't have that. So that is kind of the backdrop to all of this. It is because of the lies that our governments are telling us, and their fear of being exposed, those lies being exposed.
Yeah, and you make some excellent points about the sort of fishing expedition, if you like, as soon as these people are arrested, and the appalling treatment that they get. I mean, Harper, he was removed from the plane by 6 officers, taken to a room and informed of his arrest. Then Medhurst basically was denied contact with his family and treated harshly, being handcuffed and held for over 24 hours. The reports of the interrogation basically say he was held for about 13 hours before being questioned, and he described himself that he said the conditions were harsh, with constant audio and video surveillance and lack of basic necessities. And it's a real concern, isn't it? Because if you're just going on this fishing expedition and basically is not seeing the justice is done in a swift sort of way, it's terrifying for other people as well. What's the knock-on effect, do you think, Radha, for others in a similar position who are trying to speak out, airing their right, if you like, to freedom of expression? What knock-on effect have you seen?
I mean, I think that all of these arrests and these very public arrests, especially Telegram, is designed to scare us. It's designed to make us concerned about ourselves, because these people might have millions. Pavel might be able to access the best legal representation, but the average person is not going to have that sort of protection. And it's not much of a protection when we're talking terrorism laws, of course. But I think the knock-on effect is that people are worried. We saw cancel culture worrying people so much that they didn't want to say anything like they're not getting the vaccine or whatever it is. They don't want to say anything publicly because they might lose their job. Now, imagine if we add the risk of prison to that as well. There are a lot of voices who will potentially end up being silenced or self-silence. And I think absolutely that is part of the goal here. And also arresting Telegram founder Pavel is a message that they're sending to Mark Zuckerberg, to Elon Musk, to any other platform owners. Trump assured us that he was going to free Ross Ulbricht on day one if he's elected. Now, Ross was also jailed for the criminal activity that was allegedly on a platform that he operated, even though he had no knowledge personally or involvement in any of that criminal activity. But he was given a life sentence. And the criminals on that platform were given a few years. So that was unbelievable for a man in his 20s. And it's great to see Trump assuring us that he would pardon him essentially on day one. But then we have Christopher Ems, another one of my clients. And I think this really sort of speaks to how Britain cooperates with the US and the ramifications that it can have. I find it outrageous that we have British and American citizens needing to seek asylum in countries we consider our enemies just because that's the only place that they can feel safe from this sort of persecution. One of my clients, Christopher Ems, British citizen, he was accused of violating sanctions for going to a cryptocurrency conference in North Korea. But he checked with the British embassy, he checked with the ambassadors before he went to this conference, and they all said absolutely fine, that doesn't violate any sanctions or UK issues, and in fact they wouldn't mind meeting him there while he's there for a few days. But the US decided to go after him, put him on Interpol. He was arrested in Saudi Arabia. He was detained there for 7 months under extradition proceedings from the Biden administration who founded a cryptocurrency task force to go after anyone in that kind of crypto industry. And Saudi said no to the extradition, but he was too frightened, even though I was working with Crispin Blunt MP at the time to try to give him assurances. He was too frightened after Julian Assange that the UK would extradite him, even though he is not guilty, hasn't done anything wrong, and that he would end up in some disgusting facility in New York, which are even worse than the conditions, much worse than the conditions described by Richard. But it's just appalling that anyone is having to go through this. Tara Reid had to seek asylum in Russia because she came out about the Biden sexual assault allegations. It's just insane at this point. I think Tommy Robinson or someone in his position would feel that they're no longer safe in their own country.
Yeah, and you make some excellent points, and this is the fear for journalists and those who are speaking out on this sort of thing. I mean, I have very strong views about the Assange case, and in the end, we talked a bit earlier about plea deals. He accepted one charge and got 5 years, but obviously he was let free straight away because of time served. What was your view on that, where basically people, and you've had clients doing this, turning around and saying, look, it's going to be much easier if I just accept some sort of thing, even though I'm not guilty, a lot of people would say. Do you see clients having that conversation with you?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, Christopher Ems was one of them. He was so worried that he was going to be extradited to the US that, and they wanted him to give false testimony as a witness against some other target that they were after. So he would have had to lie under oath and give evidence against someone and be an informant, even though he didn't know this person and didn't know of them having any criminal conduct. He refused to do that, and that's when they indicted him. And then the FBI was talking to us saying, look, please just do this and we'll drop the charges and you can just have a wire fraud charge against you, if that. So it's just appalling, that kind of... and I mean, he was not going to give that false testimony. So he had two choices. He could either go to the US, cooperate, or go to the US and maybe get a wire fraud allegation against him. And remember, this is because he went to a cryptocurrency conference as a British citizen that was not illegal. So this is the US just completely launching their jurisdiction against him in an unreasonable and disgraceful way. So the conversation that he had is, yes, he would end up having to plead guilty because they threw so many charges at him that he would risk. And, you know, cryptocurrency is very confusing. Most people don't understand it. Is the average juror going to understand cryptocurrency, wire fraud, and the sort of tech behind that as prosecutors presented to the jury? I don't think so. You mentioned North Korea. A jury is going to convict you. They just, you know, they need some sort of like specialist jury to take care of to take on these complex cases, I think. So he decided, I can go back to the UK, risk ending up there and going through their justice system, or I can seek asylum in Russia. So at the moment, that's where he is. He can't come back to the UK because the US, it's outrageous.
But it totally is outrageous. And some of the things that you said, where basically you're getting people to perjure themselves on the basis that we'll give you a more lenient sentence, even though you're maintaining that you're entirely innocent. When you call this out, do you find that you yourself are threatened? Do you receive any approaches from people saying, well, hang about, why are you taking this particular stance?
I haven't found that I've been directly threatened. I have had hired spy agencies try to target me, and human intelligence attacks essentially on myself, my staff, but nothing directly in the form of a threat.
Okay, well, that at least is really, and just finally, then I'll come to James. So on this, if there will be journalists watching this at the moment who may be offered these plea deals when they feel that they're innocent, they're just basically doing what they're supposed to do as journalists, holding people's feet to the fire, questioning everything. What's your advice to them?
I mean, it's so difficult. I think one of your recent guests, or TNT guests, was recently accepted a plea deal in America as well, because he had a lot of charges thrown at him. He wasn't guaranteed that he could win in court. He didn't want to take the gamble, and he accepted 2 years jail in America. Now, he was really outspoken about COVID and all these other things, and he believes that's why he has been targeted by authorities. I don't know. I think it's an individual decision. It has to be. Just like Julian Assange, there are a lot of people who said, we're not happy that you're having to plead guilty to this, but frankly, freedom is right there. And I can totally understand why he accepted that. Although I don't see it as complete justice, because I don't think the US had the right to charge him in the first place. And I think they should have withdrawn their charges. I think that he should have been pardoned a long time ago, very much like Edward Snowden. Okay, you could argue he did the wrong thing, but he was a hero in exposing. And we do need whistleblowers to disclose when the government is absolutely exceeding their role. It's like they don't want us, the people, to have privacy or free speech, or, they don't want us to spread misinformation, disinformation, as they call it. But when they do it, it's absolutely fine. When they're the ones committing the crime, they completely get away with it. I think it's outrageous that Julian Assange had to enter that guilty plea. We also have Kim.com. I've spoken to him a few times about his situation in New Zealand. New Zealand has apparently approved that extradition, and he says that he has more up his sleeve, so hopefully he'll be opposing that. But again, will he be offered the same sort of plea deal that Julian Assange was offered? And does that really save face for America? When America does that, do we, and they get a little tick that they got a conviction, how do they look on the world stage doing that? Did that really save face? The Julian Assange deal, the fact that he was locked up in appalling conditions in the UK, it damaged the US and the United Kingdom's reputation. Absolutely disgusting that the UK cooperated as much as they did and that he was held in those conditions.
Yeah, I'm really clear on this. As far as justice is concerned, if you're not guilty, you should never plead guilty to an offence you haven't committed. It makes no sense at all. And also it sets a precedent. And with Julian Assange's case, the very fact he was a publisher, he wasn't the original whistleblower and so on and so forth. And it basically sets a precedent for other journalists. What's your take on it, James?
Yeah, I think exactly. It's hypocrisy, absolute hypocrisy. I mean, look. And, this whole thing about cryptocurrency and the Biden administration has gone after certain players in that field. But the hypocrisy around that is absolutely ridiculous. So the Biden administration itself is all caught up financially with FTX and Bankman-Fried and that whole, there's lots of donations that have been made to the Democratic Party. But of course, all of this gets reported in certain media and then it just gets forgotten about. And then we see this hypocrisy from them arresting people and forcing convictions. I'm quite shocked, actually, especially that I wasn't aware of the details of Chris M's and the fact that he was, basically detained for 7 months. And, and he'd gone to the British government to say that he was going on the trip and to check that it was all okay. Just astonishing. Absolutely astonishing. That's what I can say, Andrew.
Yeah, the important thing. Yes, sorry, go for it, Ryan.
I mean, they absolutely weaponize Interpol and the extradition process against their targets. It is disgusting. I think, yes, the Democrat administration is into crypto because they can steal assets from these people as well. I mean, in America, it's very much go after this crypto person. They've got a lot of cryptocurrency and we can seize that, and that becomes a government asset. And with Chris M's as well, the US managed to freeze all of his bank accounts, everythting that he had in the United Kingdom. So when he was going through his extradition proceedings in Saudi, he had no money to pay his lawyers. He had to raise it from his mother. It's just really disgraceful how the US in particular, and the UK has been doing it as well, but freezing assets without legal proceedings, without a conviction, without a judgment, just seizing their money and rendering them incapable of supporting themselves or hiring good representation.
Can I just ask a question? Obviously, you're an expert in this. What needs to change so that our leaders can be held responsible? Because it just seems that they're above the law, the politicians which are making these decisions. What do you think we can do? Because otherwise, it's just, it is just the Wild West, I think.
I mean, it's really difficult, isn't it? I mean, in the US, you've got your oversight committees, you've got various actions that they're trying to do to make them accountable. But it's not happening. I mean, you can see that
Yeah.
Fauci lied to Congress. You can see that he's never going to be charged with that. You can see it's not going to happen when it comes to the government. And it seems to only be the people that are at risk. The other issue that I can see is these treaties are really risky for us. These online safety bills that have come out in the UK, in Online Safety Act, digital safety in Europe, and in Australia, very strict safety laws. Now, that in Australia, they tried to censor content internationally that they didn't want Australians to see. They weren't able to do that through the courts. However, now that commissioner is seeking to achieve the same result by forming treaties with Europe, with the United Kingdom, with the United States, these backdoors decision makers, and they're going to be working together to absolutely censor that content that they couldn't get through the courts. So I think we are going to have to take a lot of legal action. We're going to see a lot of that coming up. But I dread to think what would happen if Keir Starmer starts working with Justin Trudeau in Canada, Kamala Harris in the United States. They would just be able to ram through so much legislation without public consultation, without time to pause and to contest what's being rammed through. And it could be, we might not even be able to recover from that for a long time anyway.
No, you're absolutely right. And campaigners have threatened to take the UK Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, to court over her proposed restrictions on free speech. We're going to look at that and some of these other cases straight after these messages.